Yeah, exactly.
to confront those things and get to a point whereby you've made peace with them and move on from it.
I guess maybe that feeds
as well
into the story.
also depending on the root cause.
And how can you move? Can you move
How
on from
can
the
you
root
move on
cause?
from the root cause?
Yes.
So maybe we can explore that. So in medicine nowadays, we have this thing called the illness narrative, right? So it allows for people to look at this thing holistically, right? So it's not just the root cause, but also the other core factors that come with it. So like, let's say if you're gonna have, let's say, depressive symptoms, right? Now we're not gonna just treat the symptoms. We're gonna try and look at how the person themselves look at themselves, like how do they feel and what is it about, so they get to tell their story, right? So it's, much like what we were doing, trying to paint a picture of how we got to the place that we are. So you step outside of your body and then look at yourself and say, okay, I've come this far and this is what might have gone wrong, right? Despite what the doctor might be saying. In
Yes.
the contrary.
That's basically what I was saying when I was saying it's still up to you, sort of, to figure it out.
Exactly,
Because the
yeah.
doctor can only understand the words you say, but you know how you felt about that specific event.
Yeah.
So I think people in psychology call that projections. There's a test that people used to use back in the days. I'm not sure if they still use it now, because I think at one point they stopped using it. The Rorschach test. You know the stuff where they show you pictures of a butterfly. It's not really a butterfly. It's like ink splattered on a paper. But you sort of look at it and you have to say what you see from the picture. And based on what you see, it sort of indicates your mental health and what state of mind you're in. Because you're sort of projecting. The thing is really not there in the picture at all. But it's your mind projecting. I don't know how to explain this thing. It's almost like, have you ever seen, like, sometimes you sit on, like, let's say you're in the toilet and you look at the bricks. And all of a sudden the bricks start making a shape in your head. Like, you see someone's face maybe from the bricks. So you're sort of projecting what is actually in your brain onto the wall. That is not really there.
I see.
Yeah.
So in most cases, it's almost like how the philosophy of Stoicism says it, right? The problem is not necessarily what is happening. The problem is how are you interpreting what is happening, because then that dictates how you behave and feel.
Yeah. I mean, that also feeds into Buddhist philosophy, right?
Sort of. Yeah, they sort of move into the Tao philosophy, Taoist philosophy, and what was the one that I just said now? Stoic philosophy and the Taoist philosophy. I think even Buddhist philosophy, those three sort of believe in the same thing.
Yeah.
You see, so everything depends on you and how you interpret.
And our attitudes, I guess.
Yeah, but I think depression is the main cause of depression. In most cases, is the ability to interpret information clearly. But then again, if you're sick, like for someone who is prone genetically, you don't have those skills now to interpret things clearly. Because your mind has not been trained.
Like that's true.
And that's what being socialized helps you to do. Because sometimes I think we have those traits of being narcissistic in a way. Something bad happens to you and you whine. You know how kids always whine. Obviously it's a lack of understanding that this happens to everyone. You're not a special case that you're suffering from that specific thing. Whereas for other people, of course, you may be suffering from something in your brain that is just inhibiting you from understanding. From that understanding. From it. So I think being socialized helps a lot, and actually having someone who understands what you're going through to help you to sort of guide you in a way to sort of get you to that point where you can actually perceive the root causes of your own suffering.
Okay. So I guess maybe we should just discuss briefly about the socio-economic factors and maybe, how medicine looks at this whole thing, and maybe alternative medicine, and maybe also our religious perspectives when it comes to this thing. So just to, quickly, try and see if there's a matrix here in which we can navigate and try to, come up with meaningful ways to try and navigate depression, right? Because you're only as good as what your society allows you to be most of the time.
Yeah, I think in the last episode we spoke about toxic masculinity, right? I think at that one point we did mention how being disenfranchised does lead to people becoming how can I put this in? They tend to overcompensate for their lack. You get?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that lack can contribute to someone becoming depressed. You see, because there's only three ways out. Three ways out. You either improve your social standing, or you become very depressed because you're failing to.
Yeah.
Or some people just become psychopathic. it doesn't matter anymore, and they're just willing to do whatever.
Yeah,
Because you.
that's actually true.
you
Because I
know.
mean, there's something about missed opportunity, right? So I think in Freudian theory, Sigmund Freud,
Mm.
I mean, he did say something about. I think that was his main thesis to say people get depressed because of missed opportunity. So missed opportunity can present itself in different forms, right? So there is missed opportunity in the sense of missed opportunity, like you just didn't get certain what can I say avenues open for your life, right? And then that same pain can be manifested in the same way as somebody that has lost someone who provided means,
Yeah.
right, or a way to happiness, in a way. So that's Freud, right? That's what he was seeing. That's what he thought, right? So obviously things have evolved over time. We can't really point at one thing. There's this really crazy thing that I don't know who it was, but at some point in history, somebody thought it's because of your bile duct. If you have black bile in you.
They're not be depressed or what?
In your pancreas, yeah.
Eh?
Exactly. So now if you lift your hand up at this current time in class and says, oh, it's the bile duct that causes depression, obviously everybody's going to laugh at you.
Nah, but I think eventually that's how information is, though. Or let's say knowledge. Someone has to come up with something absurd for someone else to disprove it. Then it makes sense.
Exactly. I mean, if we're going to look at religious perspectives as well, like if not too far ago, I think possibly in the 14th century or the 15th century, right? Or the 17th, maybe thereabouts. People with depressive symptoms, right, were considered to be witches
Oh.
in a
Because
way.
you're
So it's
sad.
like, well, that's the most extreme case. Most of the time, they will think you're possessed, right? Because obviously you can't explain what you were feeling, and they can't see what you were saying. So obviously, there's a miscommunication there already.
Yeah.
And people were quick to say, okay, this person is
Possessed.
is possessed,
Yeah.
right? And then further down the line, obviously, as people got more awake, I mean, it was easy to just say, this person is mad,
Yeah.
right?
That's a tough thing, though.
And then it go to the witchcraft now, where people just couldn't, obviously miscommunication, like I say. If somebody's trying to say these things, or possibly schizophrenic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You see.
And you're hallucinating a lot of things, like Lloyd.
What are you seeing?
Exactly.
They're
Because
finishing
I think it
this.
happens to our family as well. Like if someone has schizophrenia and you start seeing things and making funny noises, we always say that person has killed someone. Now that the ghost of that person
Exactly.
is coming to haunt you.
Mm.
Yeah,
Or
but
the
it's-
witches are finishing. or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Now
yeah.
you find out, you step outside the gate right now in the village, and you find somebody that is not fully clothed outside. What are you gonna say,
Well, they've gone cuckoo.
right?
Yeah.
And no, okay. Well, you
Why
can
are
say
you
that,
naked?
but you can say,
they're
Umlo.
witches.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been any inquiry about that person's state of mind.
Yeah,
Right.
they just assumed.
Exactly. So it's like, I mean, it was nice to read about in the newspapers. There you get to see some naked lady. Of course, you're a young person, so
Yeah.
hey, what's going on there, right? and that's that. But nobody really understood what was going on. I think in certain cultures, it was more understood when somebody went cuckoo than others, right? And
Okay.
some things were very obvious. So with things like schizophrenia, where sometimes you're okay, and then the next time, what's going on? Or maybe bipolar, you were happy now, and
Now we are all over.
2
sudden.
minutes later, you are like crying and doing stuff that does not really correlate with what is happening. Then obviously that made people not understand what's going on. So they would point fingers and say, this is a witch, or I don't know, this person killed somebody. So now those people, like what you were
Are
saying.
haunting him, yeah.
Is being wanted. Yeah, but Nietzsche did say, though. Well, I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier when I said, for me, religion is also one of the biggest contributors to.
I actually wanted to hear that.
Because that stuff makes.
Mhm.
Well, the reason why I say this, it goes back to what Nietzsche said when he was writing that book of his, and that statement came out of the whole God is dead thing. So, according to Nietzsche, though, and other people who are into the philosophy of existentialism, which I think is possibly one of the biggest reasons as to why people become depressed and suffer. Well, including whatever. My point is, most religions, if you think about it, make people docile. That's why most people take them as control systems, right? Okay, the world is hard. I should just be fine with it because God is coming one day to punish those who are wicked and making me suffer.
Yeah, that's a very
You see, so you don't.
big problem.
Yeah, and this now brings like this type of mentality where you become passive.
Yeah.
You don't confront your problems head on and try to change the situation itself.
You outsource your problems.
You see, you outsource your problems
to
to
the
God.
diet. Yeah.
Yeah. And those people who are punishing you and the wicked ones continue to prosper. And the gap between you and them becomes longer and longer.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they pass on generational wealth and you pass on generational sadness and depression
Yeah.
and
I
poverty.
Yeah.
You merely just pass on your suffering to your family, to the next generation.
Yeah.
They pass on wealth and all. And that's how the world, that's why we have this big gap now because of the religion that we had. But of course, eventually people became disillusioned to it.
Yeah, of course.
And that's why Nietzsche said God is dead.
So there's, I think there's this one guy, Kurt Vonnegut, right? Like you say that if people think they're friends with nature, then they surely do not have any enemies. So it feeds into what you were saying, right? So if we are going to be docile and wait for this super being to help us the whole time, right? Or people who are under the illusion that nature is for us and not really engage with it in the way that we should, because it's like life is hard. Exactly, that's what you just said now, right? And I think that's true. And most of the time we go into it because we have this fantasy about life that is all, joyful, and people are stepping out of the Garden of Eden and eating apples and stuff like that, right?
I think I was in that fantasy for too long. For too long. But I think,
Utopia.
I think that's one of the reasons that really made me depressed. Because I think like when you believe so much in religion, man, and you're raised under a Christian household, you're taught to be kind. That's the one thing. And don't sin and be kind.
Don't be kind. Yeah.
Basically, you're becoming a passive person.
Don't be revengeful.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You're basically a
Don't
passive.
avenge. Don't do anything.
You're basically becoming a passive person.
Mm-hmm.
Problem with being a passive person is you're too, what's the English word? Vulnerable. You're too weak.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And living in the world that we live in right now, especially like the townships and places with poor people, it's not a good place for you as a poor person there, man. So, and that's the one thing that will make you look like some weird person in society.
Also, another perspective from religion, when you are mentally ill, you'll be told to just say, pray, man. Just pray.
Pray, yeah,
Everything
pray it
will be
away.
fine.
Pray it
Just
away.
pray it away. Jesus, no one.
Yeah.
The word of Jesus, the lamb, the blood will wash that away. Something like that.
But on the flip side though, right, with religion, right, and especially to this thing that we're talking about now, I would like to think a significant number of people are not depressed because of religion. Because it's like, for some people, right, it's easy to get into this space where you feel like you're cornered now and you can't navigate out of it. For somebody that can think that a super being can take them out of that can be
Alleviating.
it could alleviate the problem, right? So, and the other thing about prayer and stuff like that, I was just thinking about it the one day. Like, maybe prayer is not so much of a thing where I don't think prayer as we do it now, as I do it, sometimes, as I do it, right, is meant to be the way that people do it conventionally. I think prayer is more of a thing where you speak to yourself, man, and, put yourself in tune with your problems and how you think. So it's like you understand your problem. You sort of like meditating and putting yourself in this space where you're one with the problem. You're dealing with it. Like you understand what's going on, right? So it's like, and you also are, giving yourself positive affirmations, as you speak. Because I think the way that it's done, right, it's an over-reliance on the super being. Like, God, please put me out of this situation.
But this goes back to the same thing that I said earlier. Interpretation. How do you interpret it?
Exactly, yeah.
You see now. Some people, maybe that's what it means.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, that's true. I mean, and that's also how it's taught. Because, I mean, the one thing that we don't want to play around with most of the time is assuming that people are as smart as each other.
Yeah,
you see.
That's the appeal.
Right, which is why most people follow blindly to anything. And it's a safe way to go about it, because sometimes, especially if, let's say, a religious concept is profound, right, or a teaching or whatever, like, let's say, life orientation. Life orientation is a good thing, because I think there's a lot of good lessons to get from that in high school, right? And that, as it says, it orientates your life into a good path. Obviously, if you're a smarter person, you might see problems in what is being taught and leave a different way. But most people, if they leave the way that life orientation has told them, always have a condom on, always do what you're gonna be safe. You're gonna be on the safe side, right? So that's what I'm saying about religion now. It's not always a bad thing. It depends on
it's not
how it's taught and how it's interpreted, right?
I don't think. Oh yeah, okay. Maybe I made it sound like a religion is a bad thing. No, I'm not saying religion is a bad thing.
No,
I'm
I didn't
saying.
accuse you because I also say it like on the flip side. So it's like, you know,
Oh, no,
it goes both ways in
It
a
goes
sense.
both
Like,
ways.
it goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think everything goes down to how you interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Religion can be a source of hope to keep people stable and have a healthy state of mind. Because you always know, even if maybe the whole Bible is a lie, the mere fact that you believe in it gives you that sense of hope. So you don't feel depressed all the time, right? But depending on how you interpret it again, it can feel like something that is suffocating. Like, for example, for me, when I was young, I was like, don't sin, don't, you know.
So you're always holding your breath everywhere you go.
Yeah, I think you guys remember how I was always the one
know,
chastising. Don't do it.
First, this nigga was like,
You know that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah,
So
you were the police that time, man.
Bruh, I think that stuff had always built like this type of savior complex within me, man.
I see.
You know that kind of stuff. The world is such a bad place. I should be helping people to live the right way.
Yeah.
And I think that system is good for as long as everybody else is doing the same thing.
That's
so
the
if we're
problem.
all kind and we are all, you know, trying to work towards this common goal, then if everybody is kind, then that's great.
Too much of a burden on you. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
to even help
Yeah,
others.
no.
Now you're gonna burn out.
Yeah, but I think for me, man, I was at the time practicing this thing of being too righteous without balance. I don't think in the world we live in you can be too righteous. I'm not going to say good because I don't think anyone is good. Because being good means you're pure. Inside.
Yeah.
I don't think I was pure. Obviously, I wanted to do what
Yeah.
you guys were doing, but I was like, I'll be punished by God.
I mean, it reminds me of the story of Achilles, right? I mean, he had two choices to pick. Like I think he was tempted by this improperly dressed woman, right, to go through the path of vanity and pleasure, right? While the other person was just like the other lady who was not so pretty was calling him to a life of virtue and service. Right?
We can see where you went to.
Yeah, but he did make the choice to say he's gonna be virtuous,
Yes,
right? He made the choice, but obviously he was always found on the wrong, right?
You see.
What does it tell us? Obviously, there should be a balance, man, between, you know, obviously following virtue and doing enterprise and doing things that benefit everybody else. But then there's that one thing, that thing in your brain that just wants you to, you know, to feel certain things.
You see,
And I
that's
feel
what
like,
that's what Young was saying. I'm not sure if you know Carl Jung.
Carl Jung, yeah.
Yeah. So Carl Jung normally he explains this thing using this phenomena of the shadow. He calls it the shadow. So it means basically because we live in a society that has all these religions that expect us to always behave like we are virtuous and righteous people, right? We tend to neglect the other aspects of ourselves that are not so desirable in society, like jealousy, greed, all of those things. And we vilify those things as bad things. But they're not necessarily bad because we have
part of you.
they are part of you. It's simply just they become a problem if you allow them
Yeah,
To prevent
failure
to be the dominant aspect of who you
you
are.
can't manage that.
You understand?
That's a problem.
I mean, if you have a wife and you see her flirting with another man, there's nothing wrong with you being jealous.
Yeah.
That is a threat. That person has the capacity to take your wife.
Yeah,
that is
that's-
basically what you're
that's
noticing.
absolutely true. Yeah.
It is simply just you being aware of the situation. But obviously, being aware of the thing doesn't mean you should act on it. Being jealous is not the problem. What you do after being jealous.
Even in Freudian theory, that was one of the things. Like, you know, there are these suppressed emotions or desires, actually, that we don't get to, you know, explore because, well, obviously there's this big hand that is stopping us from doing it, right? And then once it manifests, like, you are lost forever most of the time.
That's basically what Carl Jung says. They basically say that if you don't live a life that is balanced, I wouldn't say doing bad things, but allowing yourself to feel jealous or do a bit of greedy stuff just to love yourself, you don't learn how to love yourself, man. That's what I was saying. You get that that savior complex where you're always giving, but you no one gives anything back to you because now people are just using you.
That's physically and emotionally taxing. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
So because people just use
crazy.
you now, they're like, I know Ephraim will say yes if I ask him for something.
I see.
Then you
Yeah,
become this
that's crazy.
empty person. Eventually you become bitter now because you're like, I've been so good to these people.
Why can't they do the same?
They don't do
Yeah.
anything for me. Then you become bitter and angry at people, and then it doesn't really help you. Then you either become two things now: the bitter, suicidal person who is depressed and kills themselves because you feel like, this world is just
Yeah, what's the point?
the point of all of this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Or you become the psychopath who feels like, so this is how things are.
exactly, yeah.
Okay,
And
I'll
then
show
you
you.
Gotta make them see.
I'll show you.
I'm gonna see
You see?
fire.
Yeah. So and then your shadow basically manifests itself in those two ways. So
So understanding how the complex world works can actually help assist you in how you should navigate.
And that's why I was saying being socialized. Because being
Yeah.
socialized, they don't tell you be kind all the time. They teach you, like,
You're just
okay,
thrown out
sometimes
there,
you
like-
should be strong. You say no. That's why they say you shouldn't be a yes man. You should say no sometimes. So yeah, I think being socialized, being aware of the world, being aware of your own limitations as well. Because I think some people become depressed because of their own limitations.
Yeah.
Like for example, you know how it is, like where people make fun of. Sometimes you're short, or sometimes you're too dark. You know how in the townships they always say,
Exactly.
and then those things traumatize you in a way, and then you start feeling less about who you are, and you just fail to accept yourself, man, because you feel like society doesn't accept those things.
Yeah,
about
exactly. See, now that I think about it, right? Like I think we touched on this thing before, right? It's this very same thing that you're saying, right? That causes depression in some people. It's actually what keeps them in depression as well, or manifests only when you're depressed. Because most of the time, let's say, the work is overwhelming now, right?
Mm.
What's the first thing? Oh, okay, maybe one of the things that you start feeling is that maybe you are less, in a way, because other people are doing it and they haven't
That's
cracked.
fine.
Yeah,
Right, so your self-esteem takes a huge knock at the time.
you see now.
So it's crazy because it's like your self-esteem can put you in a position of depression as well.
Yes,
But once you're in depression,
it becomes worse now because
it
you
becomes
create
worse. Exactly.
you create a cycle for yourself
Mhm.
now. You
Or
start
if
thinking
you
of
were
all the
okay
negative stuff.
before, but now you're starting to feel depressed, then it takes a knock, and now you're just like, you don't feel so great about yourself now.
Yeah, I think the way they explain it is that once you're in a depressive state, you tend to do things that encourage you to stay in a depressive state. You listen to sad music. You isolate yourself from other people. You don't want anyone's advice because you feel like they don't understand me anyway.
Yeah.
They're just speaking stuff. So you create this environment of negativity for yourself.
But
Even more.
is that not the brain trying to heal itself in a way? Because
I think so.
It
Too.
is,
I
but
think so.
the
because
thing is,
we just spoke about like illness narratives, right? Like sometimes you need to put what you're thinking and how you're feeling together, right? So it's like, what do I think about this? And then maybe sometimes it's not fully articulated to you, which is why sometimes it's, there's this need to go to a psychiatrist or to a psychologist, right? And then they'll help, pick apart this matrix for you to understand it, because they have a whole degree
yeah,
at
starting
their
such
backs,
things.
looking at that. And then maybe in music, like artists can do amazing things with certain things, right? So it's like now if somebody paints a good picture of
The
what
way you
you're
feel.
feeling,
Yeah.
and then you'll be like,
That's how I feel.
Exactly.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's
I
not
know.
to accept it, to understand it. Then
Exactly,
you
but the
try to
prob-
find ways.
Yes,
But it-
the
yeah,
problem is
respect.
not listening to that person and relating. It's being stuck listening to that thing all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You understand now?
Mhm.
Because now you're sort of victimizing yourself.
Okay.
Mm.
I
Listening to it once
get
and be
you.
like, I'm not alone.
Mm.
It's fine.
Yeah,
Move on.
exactly. Yeah.
Now people will start to sit there sobbing. Oh, no one
Yeah, the whole
understands
time,
me.
Yeah.
Looking for the more. Okay, this is sad.
Yeah.
And I need a sad one. Like I've been listening for this one for a week. I'm no longer sad for it.
Yeah.
I need a more sad song.
Yeah,
You-
exactly. Yeah.
it
So
doesn't
maybe
help you.
to bring more perspectives to this, let's look at biomedical medicine, and I feel like maybe this will help us understand how deep this problem is. So it's like we are speaking about you feeling like always wanting to be in a certain state and listening to certain things that keep you in that state, right? So, I mean, there have been studies that look at the brain and see how things have changed, right, in its structure. That mirror that, what do you call it, that psychotic display, or what do you call it, a presentation of depression, I guess, in a way, all right? So, I will like quote one example about, let's say, what was this one here? Like things with fear, basically, because sometimes you get anxious because you're afraid of something, so you're constantly thinking about it the whole time, right? So with fear, they looked at the amygdala, and that's like a very small component of the brain at the very core, right? Which sits like at the very base, right? So that thing, they looked at patients with, who are fearful most of the time, right? Fearful more than normal, and they realized that if you can put an ulcer or if you can, damage it in some way, they're not as fearful anymore, right? In a way. So it's like it has a biophysiological explanation to it. So it's like there are things that can be done. So we constantly trying to find these ways to intervene, right? So it's like we were saying, your body is trying to fight this thing, right? But it's not enough now, because it's possibly more than enough than what the body can do. It will try doing certain things. It's much like with allergic reactions, right? It's your body trying to respond so quickly to an antigen, let's say.
Antigen, yeah.
Exactly, right? But then by doing so, it's also killing the body because sometimes people die of allergic reactions, right? So it's exactly that. So now that we have, I don't know if you guys have something to add on that, but I feel like, there's also a lot of medicine involved, right? So it's like, let's say, I've heard about serotonin related medicine. So you know how serotonin works, right?
I do understand where you're going with this whole thing, but the thing is, man, it's a hard thing to do. I think using like let's say medicine as a whole. Okay, so for example, so there's this guy who studies. They're basically trying to figure out what consciousness is, right? But then even that is a problem in itself, right? Because okay, let me put it like this: in the context of trying to cure depression and mental illness, right? Chances are that all of those things are just normal things. It's just that for us, we have a preferred state of mind. And that's what we deem as people. We deem that as normal based on our evolutionary line. That is the state of mind that we feel would help us survive. Because maybe in the past, such people would have been extinct as compared to, like, let's say if you had schizophrenia and you start seeing things there, you wouldn't know the difference between a predator and just a tree.
Yeah, of course.
You would end up being killed in the jungle at the time, right? But the problem is with such things, like normal is continuously changing. So how would you know like that this state of mind is the fixed one?
So I did say before that most of the time when something is now called a disorder, right, it possibly causes harm to others or to yourself, right, in a way. And I feel like most of the time things that cause harm to yourself, we might just excuse that and say, no, you can continue to do this. So I say something about not wanting to socialize. To a certain extent, you can be an introvert, and I think that can be okay. But if it's, let's say, maybe being antisocial because maybe it's a psychotic feature, right? Like you're past the point of, no, you're just at the point of psychosis, right, with that. So you are in complete disregard of everybody else. That's why now it becomes a bad thing. You can seclude yourself, but it's just like you don't care. You know, you don't want to be where people are because you think less of them.
May not be because you think less of them. Could simply because you feel less about yourself.
Well, there's that. Yeah, well, there's that of course. Yeah. So, but that'll be called a different thing altogether, right? It won't be, what do you call it, antisocial in that sense.
It is. It is. You simply just don't relate to those other people. What is antisocial?
No,
inability to adapt.
It's fine, but I mean, it's well, depending on the disorder and what do you call it in question, right? Antisocial can mean different things.
Okay.
Depending on the context of course.
Yeah, context of the disorders, right? So I feel like what he is saying is good, right? I mean, there's an ongoing debate about ADHD, right? Playfulness and not, being attentive for the most times. And then people are saying that, well, that is not necessarily a disorder. It is if you're going to try and work in the office where you are required to be concentrated.
Attentive.
Yeah. It is a problem then, but is it a problem? Maybe you're just an artist.
That's the thing.
Exactly, right? Your relativity thing that you were talking about. So for many of these disorders, right, you can argue your way out of it. But now with schizophrenia, or things that are much like it, you would like to think that there is some sort of...
The thing is, man, for me, I try not to call anything a disorder. Because I feel like as people, our knowledge in itself is so primitive. We are continuously learning things. Maybe, let's say, in the next 100 years, you find that those people with schizophrenia are not actually delusional. They actually know all this time.
Yeah, well, it's according to how we understand now, right? So that's how things change over time, right? And it appears it actually appears as if in our lifetime, right? 1 out of 2 people will be diagnosed with some sort of disorder, right? So which calls to question some of these disorders. Because obviously now you might just say like, oh, well, they're going to say that this person is a certain way, like especially most of the personality disorders, right? I mean, you can do, what do you call it? You can live a normal, perhaps not a normal life, but you can lead a bearable life if you have OCD.
You can possibly, but obviously it will hinder you somehow.
Yeah, well, that's why I would now call it a disorder, right? So it's like, I feel like there are a few disorders that we can I don't want to say we don't want to pay attention to it, but I feel like, you know, if we're gonna order them in the way that they are injurious to people's lives, some are bigger than others,
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
but none less relevant though.
Yes, I agree.
But what I want to ask is, if you are living in a constantly changing times, then what is the role of, say, biomedical medicine in curing or preventing mental illness? As you have said, that the part of the brain that is probably responsible for anxiety.
Because
So what if you remove it and then in the next few years you find
It's now
out
normal.
It's normal.
it's like being gay, right?
Mm.
I'm pretty sure back in the days, if someone was now attracted to, it's like pedophilia. You would call that some form of a disorder for this person. Right? It's abnormal behavior.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, I think I would like to say that in biomedical sciences, right, most of these things are not really effective because people continue to do research and we find these things because we are a little divorced from socio
political
political
norms.
or religious norms in a way,
Mm.
right? The one thing that people battle with is the ethics, though, because sometimes you're not going
Yeah.
to clone something because
Yeah.
the society is saying, because that's where religion, the society, and the scientists meet in the ethics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on who's made the ethics, right? And that's how far we can go, right? So I feel as though biomedical medicine, as it stands right now, like I think, you know, the infinite possibilities. It depends on the society how far we go.
Yeah.
Most of the time, yeah.
But I think like this thing is very complicated, man. Because
It
I was
is.
going to say right now that I feel like for me, medication should be given to people who feel like they are suffering. So, for example, I'll give you a case of people call it a mental disorder, right? Schizoid people. Schizoid people are people who, well, people say they struggle. They don't have feelings that much. You understand? Like they have an understanding of what feelings are to a specific degree, but the way they express themselves, obviously, there's a spectrum of schizoid. How schizoid you are.
Yeah.
I am somewhere in the schizoid myself, but I'm not obviously to the extreme point where I would actually regard myself to be schizoid. You can be schizoid at a specific time in your life, especially if you're a depressed person, where you show flat emotions, like you're not reactive, man. Even if I'm making a joke, my face may seem like
Yeah,
just
it's
bland, like
chill.
chill. So those people are fine. They're super functional. If you say something bad about them, they'll reply to you back. But in most cases, they don't care about social interactions and all of this stuff. They just prefer to be alone. But it's still classified as a mental illness, as a personality disorder, and all of this stuff. And people still want to cure it. Why? When those people are fine with it.
Yeah, well,
not
I
suffering.
guess the other thing is that we fail to find utility for it
You
as
see?
as a people, because I see that as a very positive trait. Not if you're gonna have a girlfriend though,
That's the problem.
but if you're gonna go into the army though, you're gonna be a superhero. Exactly. So it's like,
Fuck it.
I mean, you see now, and once that person realizes that's how they're being used, they might snap also after a while, like, oh, so I'm only in the army because people think I do not feel. And stuff like that. So it presents problems. So I
No,
think maybe when you,
it's not that they don't feel, man. They feel. It's just
It's different.
yeah, well, the way that they feel, right, is
It's
different to
different.
how we regulate emotions, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they can see things and then normalize
Regulate
and say
them.
like, oh,
Then-
yeah, well, it is
Then,
what it is.
then in that case, which means socialization has a negative impact as well. Because if I feel like I'm different to the rest of you all, then I'll feel some type of way about it.
that's what I was saying. Socialization, yes, being socialized can also make you depressed because I feel like, and that's why I was asking about this medical stuff of
Yeah.
trying if society is continuously changing, right? Because I feel like forcing people to conform as well
That's another issue.
makes
as well.
people depressed. Because people
Yeah.
naturally, I think, are just different people.
Yeah, well, I get that. You see, I don't think biomedical medicine is forcing anyone to take medicine.
No, I don't.
Well,
yeah.
unless if you're a kid, I guess sometimes. Because, I mean, we spoke about PTSD, ADHD.
ADHD.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Right? I
ADHD.
mean, if you're going to be playful as a kid, kids play. I mean, I think maybe you're possibly having the best time of your life then.
Yeah.
And now somebody's going to give you a very depressive medicine so you can chill. That's crazy.
crazy.
Right, it is crazy.
That's
right?
crazy.
But what I'm saying is that I think most of the time, right, if you're going to be diagnosed with a disorder that could potentially cause harm to other people, then I think maybe we should be presented with choices, whether or not to continue to interact with people or get the medicine.
I think in cases like that, like for example, if you're like a psychopath, if you're a psychopath, you don't have feelings at all. You're just cold. You're merely just doing what you have to. to get what you want to do.
Mm.
In a way, you also have this. You're sort of like a very bad narcissist person.
Mm.
And people who are narcissists, hey, those people I think will need medication as well. But the thing is, who are we to say they need medication? They are not suffering.
And you can't force
They
them to
make
take
you suffer,
medication.
yes, but they
Yeah,
themselves
exactly.
are not
Well,
suffering.
that's the thing, because we exist as a community. That's the problem now. So
You see, no.
the main thing at this point is how are we going to be able to coexist?
Yeah.
And if somebody is being a certain way, like you want to exclude a father that is not sensitive to how their kids are feeling, especially if the kids are soft, from that family, because naturally kids look up to their fathers and they go there like, oh, daddy, I'm feeling this way. I go play sack.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So it's not gonna be a good thing. So that's what I'm saying. Like I think people do try to understand these things in that perspective,
That
and it's
aspect,
I do think that we have a tendency of over treating,
yeah.
right? So if you're gonna, I mean,
Over treating, over diagnosing.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you step into a hospital right now, the nurses will feel bad for not, injecting something into you sometimes, or even giving you Panado, possibly because patients before you were pressing for something at least.
Yeah, I think that's why they have placebos for such things. Yeah,
Exactly.
because some people don't want to leave the hospital. No, I am sick.
All right,
You are not
yeah.
sick. You're fine.
It's crazy.
But yeah, but like, this thing is a very complicated.
It's complex.
It is complicated.
We can only go as far as our understanding and
Yeah.
how we see the society and the rules considered for coexistence and all the other stuff.
And I think it also depends on one's experience, because I think a
Mm.
doctor that's newly in practice will overtreat more than the other guy who's been in practice for a longer time. So that's how the system is faulty in a way. So I feel like sometimes you're gonna step into psychological practice, right? And you just tell somebody like, you know what? Yesterday I thought about killing myself, but maybe you're saying it just to express how deeply the pain was. It's not like you're.
Yeah,
gonna
now
kill
they're like,
yourself. Hey, security.
But the thing is, I feel like to add to that stuff, man. I feel like one of the bigger problems, well, maybe it's not big, but I think one of the problems as well is we just don't agree as to what a good life is, man. People don't. Some people want to be alone. They are fine.
And they're happy with
They'll
that.
be happy staying
Exactly.
alone.
Yeah.
Life, that
Right?
type of fun.
But then other people will be making you feel bad for living like
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
Because their idea of what a good life is supposed to be like is not like
Totally
yours.
different from yours.
I mean, it's the way I think about it, right? Is that a society which allows for people to live to the best of their own expectations is a good society, and I think they've done that in the Scandinavian countries, like your Netherlands, your stuff like that. If you go to Netherlands now, there is actually a whole street dedicated to prostitution and stripping.
But that's why people go and do their thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that's how liberal that society is. So liberal societies allow for people
To be who they are.
to be who they are, right? And then if you find that this is not the path that I'm supposed to be going,
Then you
you
go
change
to the environment.
after a
that
while,
you-
right? But now if there's brute force that's just telling us, hey, go to church, Baba, and get married at 23,
Yeah.
and this and that is bad, because obviously there's no, what can I say?
There's no
There's
free
no
will that
freedom
much.
to express. Yeah, exactly. A
But I
child
feel-
wants to be a singer. You're gonna say no. That's
Go
not
to
the way
school.
we go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would
Well-
rather have somebody tell me that you really have to be a good singer to do this thing. Are you sure? Is this what you want to do? I think that'll be a more a thing that I would accept more.
But it's tough now. Because if you think about it, think about it this way, like your kid now all of a sudden says, Dad, I want to be a porn star. Yeah.
All right.
They were like, what?
No, but yeah, of course.
Because I think for you it's taboo, man, because of based on how you were raised. It goes against all the principles you have. Which now still is tough because it's not, yes, those are your principles. Doesn't mean your child has to share your principles.
Yeah, but
then-
you've lived a long life, and I feel like you kind of have some experience about it, and you feel, which is why I would not tell my kid what to do. I would still advise them and tell them what to do, right? But I'm just saying, like, and it depends on how old the kid is.
But let's say
If a kid is young, they're gonna have the same values I do.
Yeah.
I suppose it makes sense because they can't make up their own values and that stuff.
Until they are old enough to make up their own.
Their own choices. Then
That's
they
why you
are.
can still come in and guide them.
But now this is the dilemma I have now, Chief, right? Let's say we are all adults, right? Never mind the kids now who can't make up their minds. Okay, all of us have specific things we want to do. Some people want to be hoes and be prostitutes and porn stars. Some people want to be we regard as righteous,
Mm.
all of that stuff, right? But if everyone is given the liberty to be themselves completely, don't you think that would just breed like chaos in the world?
It will be
Yeah, well,
chaotic,
it
man.
will, in a sense. I mean, it depends, because obviously, in the Netherlands, nobody is doing something very drastic in that sense. You see, I mean, it's people just possibly having sex with each other, or smoking weed in one corner, or doing stuff like that. So it's, I mean, you'll have to decide what is drastic for you, right? So, but what I am thinking is that liberal societies are not societies that will just say, if you'd like to kill somebody, then do that.
KKO.
Right.
No,
So
I'm
these are,
aware of what
you
the
know,
liberal
socially
society is.
acceptable. Okay, maybe let me not say socially acceptable.
The thing is, I understand what a liberal society is, but my thing is, with that is, everything starts small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's put it like this. 20, 30 years ago, everyone would have said being gay is wrong.
Definitely.
But
Okay.
because we live in a liberal world, eventually over time, it became normalized, right? And we as society have a tendency to normalize things based on how much the margin of the population tends to agree with that
Mm.
specific thing,
That's specific.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Fine. And now the question is, how far, as liberal people, would we go to allow things?
Yeah, well, I think maybe we would have to discuss on whether or not it would be wrong to be gay at all.
Well, it depends on what context you're looking at it from. Yeah, right. Understand. For me, you choosing to be bisexual. Well, maybe it's not. I don't think it's a choice to be bisexual. Okay, but you having preference, like let's say you are a guy and you like another guy, or you're a girl and you like another guy. I mean another girl, or you like both sexes, right? Honestly, that is your choice, right? There's not really much that I can do about it in terms of simply just living and coexisting. But at the end of the day, we live with a specific goal, a societal goal, not as an individual goal. As people, we have our own individual goals and
I do
family
see
goals.
that, and I
then
do
we
have a
have
problem with
societal
that
goals.
also. For me, because it's I understand this whole, we have a common goal and everything. But I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. How many people in the world are gay, though?
I don't know. That's the
So
thing.
if our common goal is to propagate our population to the next generation, I don't think if 20% of the world is gay, then we can't manage to do that.
But let me just ask: do you think? Okay, the thing is, we don't have research on this, but like, do you think it's only 20% of the world that is gay, or some people are still feel that shame?
Still in
Well, I mean, give or take, I don't think it's more than 50%. I mean, it's
Yes, but okay, let me ask you this thing, right? That's because this being gay is a newly normalized thing. It's newly normalized, right? Some people still find it weird that people are gay.
yeah, that's
Right?
true.
Even I sometimes still feel like, hey, this concept sometimes it doesn't click. But anyway, it's normal. It's fine. I move on. I don't
Let's
discriminate,
live
right?
with
Give it another 20 years. It's going to be completely normal.
Yeah, well, it should be normal.
Which means
But
people
what
who
I'm
are
saying
gay
is that all that
more-
variety, right? All that variety is supposed to allow us to continue to propagate as human beings, even if it gets to a point where it's 50%.
Yes, but the thing is, some people don't want to have children. Let me just put it like this to you, Farah. Do you think if the Christian churches or religion, let's say religion, not all religions, but mainly the main religions, Christian Judaism and Islam, right, were not advocating for propagation, because they do basically, right? Be fruitful and multiply, all of this stuff. Do you think if those people are not advocating so much for such things, people would actually care about having families and getting married and all of that stuff, having solid structural families?
No, there are people that have a tropism for that sort of thing. Have an affinity for having families and stuff like that. So
Yes.
it's
I am aware of that. I'm aware that there are some people who have it, but I'm saying
I think it goes back.
no,
to
I understand what you're
socialization
saying.
as well.
Yeah,
It's
there's social pressure to
socialization,
do that, no?
that's
It
what
goes
I'm
back to
saying.
that.
If there was no social pressure at all,
Yeah, but I mean,
Then,
we need to understand, like, it's, there's social pressure, no? And then there's you just, okay, yeah, let's just speak about social pressure. You're going to grow up, like, seeing people getting married and all that stuff, no? And you're going to have the same expectations for your life subconsciously,
as a community,
right? You're going to see that for yourself after having looked at community, right? Even without being told you should get married. Sometimes you just look at society and see that, okay, everybody is ending up with somebody.
but that's still
So
part of
that's-
social pressure, right?
Exactly.
Even if
That's
you're
what.
not told.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So it's gonna be like that, no? For some people, and then there are people who are like many women who want to get married.
Yeah.
Who what? Who want to get married?
In fact, women are socialized to
But that's
to strive
socialized still.
for
They're
Yeah,
socialized.
but I mean, also, I mean, it's